Yeah, I want. John gave one of the explanations last week on 1 Peter 3. I'm going to make an interesting observation. In 2 Peter 4, 2 Peter 3, starting in verse 14. Peter says, "Therefore, beloved, since you look for these things, be diligent to be found in him, by him in peace, spotless and blameless. And regard the patience of our Lord as salvation, just as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him, wrote to you, as also in all his letters, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to understand, which the untaught and unstable distort as they do the rest of the scriptures to their own destruction." Which is fascinating to me. That Peter says Paul writes some stuff hard to understand. Now, is that not ironic? And I want to read a quote by Martin Luther. A wonderful text is this, talking of 1 Peter 3. 1 Peter 3:18. A wonderful text is this, and a more obscure passage, perhaps, than any other in the New Testament, so that I do not know for certain just what Peter means. But it's fascinating to me that evidently he knew what it meant because he wrote it. And he thought Paul had stuff that was hard to understand. So I don't know, but I'm going to give a little different explanation. Over the years, I've always believed just pretty much like John explained last week. But a lot of, quote, Christendom believes the same thing, that God did not, or that Christ spoke through the Spirit to Noah. Christ went back and all that. Like John said, it wasn't really that Christ went and spoke to or proclaimed, preached, whatever. Anyway, there's about 5 different views on this. Everybody's confused. Nobody really knows. But their reasoning happens in the next part that kind of breaks up everything. Because if it didn't really mean that it meant Christ did that in the Spirit. They're saying, and I'm going to read a quote, because they say baptism is the same thing. Baptism is not really what saves you. This is a quote. Before you leap to the wrong conclusion, Peter clarifies it is not the act of baptism that saves you, but what baptism signifies, the appeal to God for a good conscience. They go in 1 Peter from the fact that it's the Holy Spirit and it's really not saying what it's saying type, that there's a different meaning here. And then we go to the literal saying that baptism does save you. We go from one to the other. And they're carrying on through and say, well, this is not really Christ, it went, and he went when he was made alive in the Spirit, preached to the people, it was through Noah, in the Spirit, and all of that. And they say, and also baptism doesn't really save you. It's not really talking about baptism as saving you. It's talking, as an allegory, kind of. It's the general idea that God wants you to have a good conscience. So don't jump to the conclusion that baptism saves you. What they're saying is we say this and then go literal. We go that it's talking in the Spirit about this instead of, I'm just not smart enough. The Catholic Church for a long time just said the exact same thing. They said, for Christ died once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit. In which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison. They're saying the ones that were disobedient during Noah's day. it wasn't until a little later on they said that's exactly what happened. That's exactly, what I'm saying happened. But they made a whole doctrine out of it that it's a second chance, it's purgatory. You can pray for your secret best friend and just pray and give a little money, and then we can pray him on up, and that's where purgatory came from. And I'm not agreeing with that. I'm not saying it has anything to do with purgatory. I'm not even saying there's a second chance. I'm saying that what happened is the knowledge of good and evil. You have the knowledge of good and evil, and I want to go on to explain that. But there's a couple other things that I used to believe, and I used to agree with John up until just recently on sacrifice. Let's go to Hebrews 11:4. That was a verse that's been used, and I understand it, but I read it different. When it's talking about faith, but by faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice than Cain. But I disagree that sacrifice is always for sin. Through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous, God testifying about his gifts through faith. So it was his gift, and gift, the first time sacrifice is used is like Genesis 30 something. I got it written down somewhere. Genesis 31. Jacob and Laban, right before Laban, Jacob's fixing to escape. Jacob escapes, and Laban catches up with him, and God tells Laban, you better leave him alone. Don't you say anything, good or bad, to him. Well, they give the little argument, and they make this peace offering. They made a sacrifice. That's the first time the word's used. Offering is used, but sacrifice is used. And it has nothing to do with that, except I'm not going to get you, you don't get me. You know what I'm saying? Don't you come, I'm not going to do anything evil to your daughters, and don't you come and do anything, may God watch between us. So, that's a sacrifice, and it doesn't necessarily mean the same way in Leviticus 3. There were peace offerings, which were sacrifices. They were peace offerings. So even though, mostly what we think of as sacrifice for sin, it's not always sacrifice for sin. And when we go back and look at, and I want to make I'm saying Abel's was a gift, and I want to give an example. I thought it was my wife's 25th wedding anniversary. I thought we had been married 25 years. Unfortunately, I can't count. So I've scrimped and saved and scrimped and saved and scrimped and saved, and it was her 24th anniversary, so she wanted something again when the 25th come around. But I just said, wait, no, we're going to have to make this one stretch. But I sacrificed for a gift for my wife. You understand what I'm saying? It's the same way we do that a lot of times for our kids. What do? We scrimp and save and sacrifice so our kids can have this or have that. That's the way that I'm looking at the word sacrifice here, since God said his gift was pleasing to him. So I go back that it's not... Let me go back to Genesis 3:20. I'm trying to give my explanation because it doesn't fit with anybody, unfortunately. So I know that I've got to be wrong, but I'm going to tell you how wrong I am. So then there was another comment, and this really bothered me, and because I believed exactly. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was telling John when made a comment about the sacrifice. God had made garments of skin for Adam and Eve. And, it's always been in my brain, the same as John, that was the first sacrifice. And it was really bugging me, because I went back. I said, well, I'm going to reread this whole thing. I'm not seeing something, or I'm thinking something different, because if that's the case, But you know, God, it says, God made the animals. God made the sun and moon and stars. God fashioned Adam from the dust of the ground. God made Eve from a rib. And, you know, I got to thinking, well, if I'm God, which is a bad thing to think, but, you know, that's what I'm going back, you know. Why should I kill an animal? I can make clothes out of anything. I can make anything. I made the world. I can make anything. So then I say, well, maybe God just made them clothes, because I'm going to let Adam be the first one to have to kill somebody. I'm going to let Adam be the first one when he has Cain and Abel, and it's time for their clothes. You go kill the sheep, you go kill the goats, you go kill it and see. I know Adam and Eve had to change clothes at some point in their life. I mean, Adam lived 930. God might make some pretty good breeches, but that, you know, we all have a tendency to wear clothes out. Maybe Adam had to see what his sin caused. That's a possibility. Instead of God making the sacrifice, because it doesn't refer to it anywhere else, and it makes reference to God making this and making that and making Adam out of the dirt and making... Even though I've believed all of this all my life, I keep coming back to that you remember right before Eve, God made Eve. What did God do with Adam? Brought the animals before him. And every one. And he gave it a name. And he gave it a name, and he gave it a name, and he gave it a name. Every one of them. It wasn't until we read in Genesis chapter 9 that God says, let's look at it exactly. Let me zip through here. Genesis 9. I think it's Genesis 9. Genesis 9, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth, every bird of the sky, and everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. I assume Adam walked up to the biggest rhinoceros he wanted to and petted him on the head. It doesn't say there was terror before. God says now there's going to be terror of the animals of you. We know Abel offered a sacrifice, offered a gift, offered whatever. But I'm not saying that it was for sin. And, you know, I'm saying there's a difference. I've always thought that's what God did, but then I got to reading it, and it never says God did it. It says God made for them clothes of skin. Garments of skin. Clothes, we use the word clothes. But since God could make anything, why would God have to kill anything to do it? You know, if it was later on in the Bible somewhere that it said God did the sacrifice to cover man's sin, but I just don't, you know, and that's me. I just think God made it where Adam had to do it. If you want clothes and they're of skin, you got the pattern. You pay the price. You know, if I was on friendly terms with all the animals, it would be a hard thing to do. I don't know if y'all ever had to put a dog down or anything. But, you know, I have to go to the vet. I can't look it in the eye and kill the poor thing. I mean, that's just me. But if I knew I had to make clothes and I had to be the one to look the animal that I named in the eye, what would that cause me to think if I was Adam? You see what I'm saying? I mean, these events had to have occurred at some point. This had to have occurred. I mean, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I seriously doubt Adam just went up there and slit his throat and thought it was a great thing. Not after I was made, and he brings all the animals to me, and I give them a name. And who knows that you couldn't have talked with the animals, since it wasn't surprising for the serpent to talk to you? I don't know. But it just doesn't, I can see an alternative to, I can see an alternative to that. Anyway, go ahead.
Do you admit that the language allows for either?
Yes. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm sitting back and looking at the word "made" is what I'm saying. And that, you know,
and that
God.
word that create and made, sometimes it's the same word, and sometimes it means ex nihilo, out of nothing.
Yes.
Sometimes it means fashion.
Exactly. And sometimes it says God created and made.
Yes.
So both words are used in the same thing. Yes. Because it's made is a general, you know, it means to make. I mean, you know, to make something. I mean, this is so. But
at some point, man learned what sacrifice was.
Oh yeah, made an offering, and that's where I'm saying I keep coming back to the knowledge of good and evil, and the reason all of this is occurring in my head is because you have the rulers and authorities in the heavenlies. And we've got to go all the way back. We've got the rulers and authorities. They did not know, and if I spelled authorities, whatever, I don't know. Anyway, don't go by the spelling, you get the general drift. That's why I need to abbreviate everything. Rulers and authorities, that's what the church, they did not know what the church was. And the church was how God was going to, what God did before the foundation of the world. They're the ones watching all of this. We're participants. They're spectators to a certain degree. And when we talk about prison, I know everybody says, well, you know, that's really hell. I think, well, Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions, many rooms, many dwelling places. And I go back and I think, well, where do all these rulers and authorities live? I mean, do they just float around up there? I mean, God didn't do that. I mean, he made a temple. He gave certain instructions. The temple's going to be this, that, and the other, and the tabernacle's this way. Then I think, well, because I don't know what goes on in the heavenly realm. You understand. But something's going on. And the angels are ministering service sent out to render service for those who would inherit salvation. I know there is good, and I know there's evil, and I know man has it. Now, I want this. I'm going to give an example, and I want you to think about this. You're out working. You come home, and you find your wife in bed with another man. What is the first thing you think? I mean, don't mean killing him. What is the first thing you think?
This is wrong.
This is wrong. Do you say, let me see, I know it's in Deuteronomy 20 somewhere that there's a law against adultery. No, you innately, in your mind, say this is wrong. If there was no law against adultery, would you think it was wrong?
Yes.
When Paul says in Romans 5 that without law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed without a law. Now, you would say this is wrong, but who would you be angry at? The man or your wife? I would say the wife. Because I have a relationship with you. I don't know this guy. She's the one that violated me. She's saying she doesn't love me, even when we've done all of this. That's who. Now, if you come home and some guy's raping your wife, who are you going to be angry with? The man, because why? Is there? You don't bust out the little Old Testament, go right through there. Woo! If they do this, stone them to death. You don't break out the law because you know in you that there are things that are right and things that are wrong. It's fascinating that we have to go to the Old Testament, the law, really I would say Job, but I'm going to go all the way to the law just so we know that there's law and there is knowledge of good and evil. You are angry at the man because he is violating you. He is violating your wife. He is the one doing it wrong. And you say, this is wrong. Nobody had to tell you it was wrong. That's why these people, from Adam to Noah, if I read it, where Christ went and spoke to the spirits who went to the spirits in prison, to those who were once disobedient, if you look up the word, it can also be unbelieving. Believe not. What happens when you talk to the guy that's raping your wife? You talk to him, find out they didn't care. You keep going back. At some point, they knew right from wrong, but they keep giving up. It's fascinating to look at Cain. What did he do? Look at his ancestors. Look at them. In just a little bit, they went to, kill them 7 times. You won me all 77 times. You have knowledge of good and you have knowledge of evil. You never, right off the bat, when somebody steals something from you, bust out the law book that says, hey, they violated section whatever. We don't do that. What do? That was mine. You took it. You know that's not right. There are things that you know that are not right. Even children know that are not right. The rulers and authorities are watching this. Let me make sure I didn't skip something. Yeah, I want to go back to Noah. Genesis 6, let's start in verse 9. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. So he was righteous and he was blameless. Does that mean he was sinless? You remember what happened to Cain? God said, behold, Cain's countenance fell when God said, I don't accept your gift. I don't think this was worthy of me. You would not bring dead flowers to your wife, on your anniversary. There are certain things you don't do because it's not acceptable. But God said, behold, sin is crouching at the door. And its desire is for you, but you must master it. He's telling you what there is good and there is evil. And you better get it, because this is not acceptable. Was there a law? Did God give them a law? I don't think so. We have the knowledge of good and evil. We became God when we gained knowledge of good and evil. If God is demonstrating the church to these rulers and authorities, Paul's revealing it to them. He takes them from just having knowledge. Let me finish reading. I'm skipping here. Verse 11. Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. Do you know what the word corrupt means? To destroy, corrupt, to ruin, decay, to spoil, to ruin, to pervert, to destroy. So what did they do? When you corrupt your way, when you've ruined your way, we can take a piece of meat and leave it out, and what happens to it? It corrupts. We can do that with anything will corrupt. But when we corrupt our way, when we ruin our way, when we spoil our way, the knowledge of good and evil, my belief, just because of the way it's working, is they had the knowledge of good and evil from Adam to Noah. God, if Christ did come back, I'm just reading the verse for what it's saying now. I'm just a farmer. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not any of that. I'm just reading it and saying, and it's fascinating, like I said before, Peter says Paul teaches stuff hard to understand, and here everybody's trying to, he doesn't think he's doing anything. It's hard to understand. But how God brings these rulers and authorities to understand the church and how we understand the church, and it's the church is the called out. Where is God calling us from? From corruption. And this is, God says, this is how. You see these people? I'll just give them, they want to be God. You have knowledge of good and evil, and let's see what you do. Now, how many people with the knowledge of good and evil are going to do good all the time? This is just with the knowledge now. There's no law given. God didn't tell Cain, now, look out now. This is, you violated the law. There are things in us.
What did he mean, though, when you told him sin? What did sin mean?
Sin means you're missing the mark.
Well, there had to be a mark for him to miss.
Yeah. You look. Abel brought the good sacrifice. Cain brought his. Abel brought his. Abel brought the first of his flock. Okay? He brought the best. I'm saying that the gift, God's saying, do you see everything around here? I made it. Do you see all the animals? Do you think Adam and Eve didn't talk to him and say where they came from and how they fell? And we were in the garden. We assume, we just read 2 verses and we don't assume that conversations had to have occurred. When God says, behold, sin is crouching at the door and its desire is for you, but you must master it. You're the one in charge. You are God. You know good and you know evil, and you wouldn't accept this gift. You wouldn't bring rotted stuff to somebody else, but you're bringing it to me.
Okay, so there could still be sin even though there was not any.
Well, that's what Paul says. Sin was in the world from Adam, but it was not imputed. It's not charged to anybody. Why? Because there wasn't a law. He says there was no law. But the law you have is in your mind. I know right from wrong, just like you don't have to have a law. We wouldn't have to have the first law to say, don't abuse a child. Don't, rape somebody's wife. Don't steal from that person. Why? Because I look at myself. That was mine. You took it. So the question is, I know you took it, and you know you took it. Okay? But you wouldn't want somebody doing that to you. Why did you do it to them? We do that without even knowing a law. We don't have to have somebody. God puts the law in. Why? Let's go back and let's look at I don't know if I even wrote it down, but let's see, Genesis. I'm thinking 30, maybe 31. I don't know. No, it might not. Let me see. I'm probably all wrong here. I might be thinking of something else. Yep. Okay. Let's see. Maybe it's 34. Oh, yeah. Okay. Chapter 34. Now, I want you to explain this one to me. This is before the law, right? Moses is the one going to give the law 400 years from now. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. When Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. He was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her as he raped her. Okay, so what is this conjuring up in your mind? What do you think Shechem thinks about rape? Okay, all right, so Jacob finds out. He doesn't say anything to his sons. Now the sons of Jacob, going on down verse whatever it is, from the field, when they heard it, the men were grieved and very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. There's things that we know that ought not to be done. There's an ought that has nothing to do with the law. Because you ought not to do stuff. So what does that ought signify? A conscience. And that was interesting because baptism, Noah, all of that was for a clear conscience. All of that was so these people could have a clear conscience. Now, I'm not trying to be heretical. This is just farmer thinking. That's why Christ, if he did go speak to the spirits in prison that were disobedient during this time, it was an explanation of, ought you have done this or ought you not to have done this? Because if you're surrounded by nothing but corruption and you were left, if I was left on my own with just the knowledge of good and evil to not do evil, I hate to tell you, I wouldn't be here. I don't know anybody that could. Of course, we had Enoch and Noah. But you know right from wrong, but doing it. Now, what do you do when you do one thing wrong? And then you do it again. And then you do it again. Even though you know and you might feel guilty, I really shouldn't have done that. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. What does Paul say?
Sears your conscience.
It's seared. And once it's seared, what do you have?
It has no feeling.
You have become God. You've got the knowledge of good and evil. Shechem thought it was good. Now, how warped can you make yourself to become? Anyway, they're watching this, and it appears to me that God says, see, this is what you're going to have. There is nothing but corruption, violence, nothing if you had the knowledge of good and evil, let me show you what it's going to be. And the question is, if you look and see there is not but one man. Now, I don't know. A fascinating thing to me is another blurb in your brain. You know, Lamech, he done had 2 wives, you know. Said, Adillah and Zada and Zillah, whatever, you know, I struck, God wounded me and I killed him, and a boy struck me and I killed him too, and, you know, I should be avenged. He done got 2 wives. It's fascinating that you had Adam and Eve. You know, Christ said from the beginning it was not so. I had to give you a certificate of divorce. Now, how many wives did all these have? Noah had Noah and his wife. You know, everybody else, who knows how many wives they had? Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, why stop at 1? Why stop at 15? Why, when you're messed up in the head, that's why God said it was not so. Because of the hardness of your heart, I had to put this law in that allowed you to do that, even though that's not what I want you to do. You got the knowledge of good and evil to know you shouldn't do it, but you do it anyway. So I'm going to make this law when he gets up here to allow that, but that's not what I wanted. So if we were back here, and that's what God, you got the knowledge, and that's, I don't know if Adam had another wife. I wouldn't think so. I mean, she was created out of you. You live 930 years. And everything you see around you, man corrupts his way. Just if that's all you had, and you had no direction. And guess what? The Jews had the law. Could they keep it? We have the New Testament. The Jews just had to not kill their brother, right? We're not supposed to hate. How many of us have ever hated somebody? How many of us have ever lusted? How many of us have ever had envy? How many of us have ever gossiped? How many of us? We're not any different from them, except what do we have that they don't? That they did not have. That's what I'm saying. I can break open the book and read it and say I'm not supposed to do that, and I still violate. That's the whole purpose of Christ. The rulers and authorities had no idea how God was going to have to save this place. They kept going. It wasn't until Paul explained it that he reveals this, that the manifold wisdom of God through the church was revealed to the rulers and authorities so they could see God. This is the path of how evil, and there's no difference to me from here except they were left alone. You've got Job. I got about three more lessons, and then I'll let John get back to straightening y'all out or straightening me out. You have starting, with Abraham. There's Melchizedek. God's moving in the world, and I do not know how. I just know he talks to, there's some reason, there's something introduced that eliminates the corruption. But even like the Tower of Babel after Noah, man still can't do it right. Fill the earth, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. You can't do it. We still can't do it today. There's no difference except we know what the story is. That's the reason God himself had to come and die and pay the price to redeem man. Because we all have the knowledge of good and evil. They have the knowledge of good and evil. But what I'm saying is they didn't have anything written. They had the knowledge, and that's all. Just follow. If you're going to be God and you want to be God, You be God. And the problem is we can't be God. They couldn't be God. It gets down to where there's not but one person left. Now, it says Noah. Let me get back over here. What is it? 6. I got one more minute. Noah was a righteous man and blameless. He did right, and he was blameless in his time. But if Noah sinned, if you have to count sin against him, I mean, unless God's going to forgive the sin, there's no way. You can't say he was sinless. There's a lot of people that were blameless. God did not lay the blame against them. And that's what Romans 5 is, and we'll do it eventually. I'm over time. But it will make sense. I got 3 lessons, and I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I'm just going to go through how I think it happened and why it happened. But I want you to see that the knowledge of good and evil is in your head, and you have the knowledge. You got the law in your heart. Nobody has to tell you right from wrong. If you had the knowledge and a good conscience, and you did not violate it. Because every time you violate it, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and you start doing like Shechem. Well, I want her, I rape her, I'll speak tenderly to her. It's the dumbest thing I ever heard of my wife, but he thought it was good. Anyway.